The right genes can make us stronger, faster, and better. The wrong genes can lead to health issues, injuries, and disease. Dr. Stuart Kim teaches us all about it in this episode of the Winning Wellness Podcast.
We're talking about X-Men-like mutations that give you superpowers and like super strength, or then we just let our imaginations run. You have $1 billion, it's scientifically plausible for me to edit your genome and give you some superpower.
Welcome to the Winning Wellness Podcast. I'm your host, Mitch Schwartzman. I'm a family man, a coach, a wannabe athlete. After earning 3 master's degrees and countless certifications, I've decided that podcasting is how I'm going to continue my education in all things wellness, longevity, and performance. Join me to learn along.
This all started when I had a chance lunch with a guy who's now a friend, but he was a professional athlete. He played for the Saints and 49ers. And so I'm a geneticist. I'm an academic geneticist. I understand the science, but Jim Kovac is my friend's name. And he started to introduce me into the world of elite athletes. So as a professional, he was at the top of the top. And then at Stanford, once I started to think about doing sports genetics, I had all of these elite athletes want to join my lab. And so for a while, I was, it just seemed like it is a really good idea, what we have. And so, the concept is that elite athletes, it's a fraction of a percent is the difference between gold and fourth place. And fourth place is a really crummy place to go. So you want, if you top so it's imperceptible. It's a tiny little edge. Or for triathlons, you probably know that, the kind of equipment that you get to compete is really expensive, and it's only fractions of a percent faster than the everyday equipment. So I know a little bit about bicycling, but an Ultegra versus the Dura-Ace, do you know this? Okay. Well, it's with all sports. I mean, the difference between getting a scholarship and playing college sports is like a fraction of a percent. Like a good IM is not that much different from the varsity athletes. So there's a real break off there. And then, a good varsity athlete getting drafted into the pros versus not getting drafted, it's fractions of a percent. So that's where it all makes sense to me, because, the genetics I talk about will give you fraction of a percent. And lots of times this is going to be really helpful to you. And under the idea that, for athletes that really just need the last combining edge, this is a no-brainer. This will work. If you are like a couch potato versus, you are a couch potato, but you want to go out and do like a 10K or a marathon, that's a big jump. And that's not what I'm talking about. And then one other thing is everything is part nature and part nurture. So you do the nurture stuff, right? The nature stuff is how you were born. And some people were just born more muscular, and some people were born with more endurance, and some people were born this, that, and the other thing. I can tell you, the genetics can tell you more about the nature stuff. So especially the things, this might come up in your things, but there are things that you measure and think about, like how strong are you? What's your heart rate? What's your lung capacity? All that sort of stuff. That is kind of easy to measure and to know. And you can measure how fast you run the 40-yard dash or something like that. You know that. You know that very, very well. Genetics isn't really going to budge that very much just because you know a guy's heart rate, so precisely. How the hell is genetics going to really improve? So generally, that's not where we excel. But there are things you don't know about, which is musculoskeletal injuries. So at the beginning of the season, you have your team, and you don't know which guys are going to get knee injured or shoulder injured or something like that. And because you don't know that, everybody just gets the same rehabilitation exercises. You train them up all the same, and some of them get injured, some of them don't get injured. But that's where genetics can tell you which guys are at most risk for knee injury or shoulder injury or stress fracture. And that is enough, it's definitely enough for you to incorporate into the training plan in the preseason so that they don't get an injury, with the idea that, an injury isn't a small thing. You get almost any injury and you lose big time because you can't train while you're injured. There the triathletes that joined my lab when I started this idea, they were always getting injured pretty much once a year. And what would happen is they would ramp up and up and up in endurance. They would get injured, have to take 2 or 4 weeks off, and then they would regress while all of their competitors were going up and up and up in their thing. And so they would lose ground. And that was the biggest thing. I mean, they could train 20 hours a week and get they were completely in control of their, I would say, their performance, their strength, their weight, but they had no idea what kind of injury they were going to get. And so that's what, that's the idea, is that we've developed a product that works for pretty serious athletes, where it makes a difference whether you can compete or not. So
So 14 years ago, I spent a little bit of time at Baylor University, and they had their team genetic tested. But back then they were looking more for, oh gosh, I guess I'll call it like propensity for excellence. Would I do better as a marathon runner or a sprinter or what? And is so you guys aren't doing that. Is anybody still doing that, or is this?
Yeah, lots of them do that, but I think it's all bullshit.
Yeah, is it bullshit because the science doesn't back that up, or because once you're already 10 years into being passionate about football or whatever it is, you're already there and you're going to continue on that path?
You're probably thinking about a gene called like 10 and 3. You know that story? So that's a gene that is associated with power versus endurance. It encodes a muscle protein, and a lot of people don't have this protein. And so I think it's reasonably clear, but not that clear, that if you lack this protein, you're a better endurance runner. And if you have this protein, you're a better power athlete. But the effect is tiny. And so there are Olympic level power athletes that don't have the gene, and there are Olympic level marathon runners that don't have the gene. So I would say this thing isn't going to determine whether you're marathon or power, because you can make it to the Olympics with any genotype. If you do enough studies, you can get the statistics to support that there is some effect. It is not that crystal clear. So there's like a paper says there isn't. There are 5 papers that say they can't find an effect. So it's not that clear, but probably there's a little bit of truth to it, because there's over and over again that they found an effect. So I'm not arguing that it's nothing, but it's really small. And, even if I were a good athlete, I would ignore it. I would just do the sport that I like. Um, and that's going to outweigh this power versus performance. It also illustrates, an intense desire. I know exactly what types of things you guys want to find out. You guys meaning all athletes. How how strong will I be? How is my endurance? Uh, you know, Never mind the psychological things you want to know. Do you have the clutch factor and things like that? So if I was dreamed about how to do that, um, we did come up with having said all of that, that doesn't mean there isn't a gene out there that really has a big effect. So what the hell is the name? This gene is called, my memories. So that it's called, there's a gene that can make you so muscle bound. There's only one or two people in the world. There's a kid in Germany, a young child. He's like 5 years old, and he's holding up huge weights on both arms. And there are animals that have this mutation, and they're just
Yeah,
muscle brown cattle and muscle brown dogs, and they don't look normal. They just look incredibly muscle bound.
they're missing the inhibitor gene, correct? Is
What's
that
the
the
gene? It's
I think there's like a bluebell cow that looks like a bull on steroids with no horns, and
yeah,
it's just a cow. Yep,
that's cow.
yep.
There's a dog breed that has a mutation in the same gene, and this dog is just muscle bound. And there are a few people like this German kid. He's probably grown up now, but um, that there could be things like that. And Jim and I wanted to search for this kind of a gene that really makes a difference. So at birth, if you knew your kid had this mutation, this kid's going to be way stronger than anybody else possibly in the world. I mean, there's going to be way stronger than anybody he meets in the school, uh, and whether there's anybody else, at the pro level, that would work. And we wanted to start a research project to look through for genes that really had this big effect. So. Uh, think of it at, like the difference between a college athlete and a pro athlete is tiny. We're talking about X-Men-like mutations that give you superpowers and like super strength, or then we just let our imaginations run. Maybe there's something that lets an athlete not feel pain. That's definitely plausible. Or an athlete that has reactions quicker than normal humans, or eyesight better than normal humans. When we developed a research program to go and screen people to find such genes, but that research project never got funded.
Yeah. There's
So I'm a professor I was a professor at Stanford, and now I'm running this company, but I'm a scientist. I see this as an interesting niche science project. And so I'm trying to make a positive impact into the athletic community with genetic research that wouldn't otherwise be accessible.
and from what I gather on the website, you guys are starting to focus more on those injury sites within the body and predicting those injuries.
Yeah, there are two parts. There's injuries. I like that because, like I said, the injury is devastating. It's not a small effect. And so anything you could do, and knowing your risks and including rehabilitation exercise specific for those injuries has got to help. And if you're talking about somebody that really cares about competing, like an Olympic athlete, a professional athlete, it's devastating to miss the playoffs or to miss the gold medal round. This definitely makes sense. There's also performance and nutrition. That's harder to do because it's, your weight. And so I could, give you a genetic prediction for your height and weight, but your height, your weight exactly. And so why do you need, a genetic prediction for that? There's a few that do help, but for instance, whether or not you should eat gluten. And so gluten is in wheat, and athletes have huge appetites. And if, in certain people, you start eating a lot of wheat. There was this lineman in the SEC, and he was a terrific athlete. He just had intestinal issues, and he wasn't able to perform because his intestine was always giving him pain. Turns out he had it's an allergy. It's not really an allergy. He had inflammation from eating too much wheat. And so once we told him that, he cut down on pizza, pasta, and bread, got his calories from something else. Stomach didn't bother him very much anymore, and he had a terrific season. And that's at the SEC is a pretty high level. So this is somebody who wasn't going to play to somebody who played at the SEC level. So that was pretty good.
How many? So you take, maybe I send in my blood, and you're looking at, you say, is there 1,000 different injuries you guys are listing right now? Is there 100? Is there 25?
I think it's 17 different musculoskeletal injuries, and maybe 14 things that are in diet and nutrition. And so, like my profile says that I'm genetically low in vitamin D, and I am low in vitamin D. Vitamin D is the one you get from sunlight, but it's, it helps with muscle strength and bone strength. And so knowing that, I know to take vitamin D supplements. It's pretty easy.
Yeah. Yeah, 17. What are some of the common of the 17 injuries that you guys are labeling?
Let me share my screen and we can look at this together. How's that?
That'd be great.
These are my results. These top results, they're not for athletes. This is for physicians. But here we're talking about, here are the musculoskeletal injuries. You can see this screen, right?
Yes, I can. Yes, I can.
Okay. So how many? 4, 8, 12, 15. Kind of musculoskeletal injuries. The ones that are the best, this one, I really like the test for stress fracture. The idea behind stress fracture is it's the perfect storm. It's a really common injury for endurance runners. Lots of athletes, but especially endurance runners. And it's highly genetic. It's based on low bone mineral density. And that there's a pretty good algorithm that can predict your bone mineral density. Most people don't know their bone mineral density. And if you knew that you had low bone mineral density, there's all sorts of things you could do to not get a stress fracture. So, my idea was that, the Stanford cross country team was always in the competition for being a national champ. And at the time, the coach took the strategy that I'm just going to run them to death. And I'm going to run them so much that 40% of my team get a stress fracture. But the 60% that make it to the end of the season, they're going to be so fucking fast that we're going to do well as a team. Well, the athletes didn't like that because 40% got stress fractures. But, much smarter way to do that at the beginning of the season, just figure out which ones are at risk and which ones aren't. And there's all sorts of things you can do to give your athlete, the cardiovascular attention he or she needs, but don't let him get stress fracture. It's a repetitive use microfracture injury. So just reduce the impact, or move the volume from pounding on pavement to something that's less stressful, like a bicycle or running on grass or something like that. There are also better shoes. There are all sorts of ways you can completely avoid stress fracture if you knew to focus on it. And all of these other things you can, and some of these are devastating injuries, like ACL injury is the most devastating. Some you won't see while you're young, but hip osteoarthritis and knee osteoarthritis, like knee osteoarthritis, if you're playing if you're running back in football, or if you're an alpine skier and you're just killing your knees, it'd be nice to know if you're at risk for, like, look at me, I'm at the 99th percentile. So, I don't have much cartilage in my right knee anymore. And it'd be nice to know that, this was an issue. And so I would still ski for sure, but I would do things to, brace the knee or just somehow strengthen the knee so that, didn't have so much bone on bone when I got old. Concussion is a good one. We're the only company that did a rigorous test for concussion. And that's something you don't know. I mean, you just go in and play football, and are you going to come out with a concussion or not? And are you at risk for concussion or not? And there are ways to reduce the chance of getting concussion. I think, the trainers are strengthening the neck muscles. But when you get hit, you're snap back. So that's what you know about. What AxGen tells you is what to think about. So generally the deal is we work with trainers and we tell you, like if I were on your team, you would see knee osteoarthritis, shoulder instability, Achilles tendon injury. You know, and you just have to say, okay, what kinds of rehabilitation exercises do I have in my bag for that? I mean, we tell you exercises. So this is our in-house trainer, Chris Lee. But generally, I haven't found, I mean, the trainers all seem to know, what to do for each injury. So once you see this is a red card, this is a green card, you know what to do. And even if you don't, you can just look and see the exercises that Chris Lee has put up to do.
Now, with something, whether it's an ankle injury or a concussion, are you guys advanced enough or at the stage yet where if it's concussion, is that person getting concussed because genetically they have less muscle mass around their neck? Are they getting concussed because they have a thinner skull? I mean, do we know exactly why or not quite yet?
Good question. So generally, we don't know. Like the ACL things, I have no idea why they affect your ACL. So if you ask me about ACL risk, it's not obvious just from the gene and the biology of the gene what the hell that has to do with the cartilage. Concussion is the one test that's different. It makes total sense. It affects genes that affect how axon, like neurons, connect to each other.
Okay.
So, when an axon and a when they make connections, it's called a synapse. And the two genes involved in connections both fuck up how your brain makes synapses. And so, the weak effects from concussion, there's a way to make a it's called uh, if you completely obliterate the gene, not just slightly change it, you completely obliterate the gene, you get these things where as a baby you die from having concussion-like symptoms all the time. And so, I think it makes a lot of sense that if you just have a tiny change in these genes, you grow up and
Oh,
you live normally. It's just that if you hit a linebacker, you're at and you're more likely to get a concussion from hitting a linebacker than hit by a
yeah.
baseball.
Yeah. That makes sense because there's some athletes where they just get a small bonk basically and
Yeah,
they're out for extended periods of time or they just retire. And there's other athletes that just
yeah,
they eat concussions for breakfast and you don't know why they now obviously there's untold horrors down the road, but just in like the short term of a college career,
yeah,
you don't totally understand why you can't put your finger on why who's going to take them in different ways.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah, that makes
so these are all of these tests up here, these injury tests make total sense because as a trainer, you really don't know who's, who's at risk for plantar fasciitis versus stress fracture. You just have to treat all your athletes the same. This is a way to personalize their training program, and
yeah.
it almost has to work. Uh, well, let me tell you what we know this because this is based on 500,000 people. And so the science is really rock solid. The part I don't know is if you said um, baseball pitchers, how much shoulder injury in professional baseball pitchers is there? And there just aren't enough baseball pitchers to answer that right now. But it almost certainly is a real effect because it's based on uh, published data based on 500,000 people. And that's the part that I like because the science is rigorous and the facts should really, when we first started the company, I thought like everybody would sign on to this technology. So that's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah. Um, with the different injuries and maybe not different sports, are you guys noticing a pattern that different now as a no genetic bearing whatsoever, I know that my athletes, male versus female, are going to have some different injuries. How does is that a factor for you guys? And if it's not male versus female, how about just different populations or
Yeah.
different groups?
Well, the 500,000 people were all European. So
Okay.
all of this data really applies to guys that look like you and not guys that look like me or Hispanics. So there's that. That's true for all genetics, basically. It's mostly true for East Asians. I'm East Asian. Uh, but if you press me, it's not going to be exactly the same as Europeans. Uh, Men versus women, none of these are different between men and women. So the science was worked so that it just obliterates difference between men and women. So this you could apply equally no matter what the sex is.
Okay,
There's
that's interesting.
one that makes a difference. So that is muscle strength testosterone. So there it matters if you're a man or a woman, and we give you a different score based on your sex. What's that? Yeah, men versus women. So women never have as much testosterone as a man. So you wouldn't want to compare them. And the genetics for testosterone in a woman is fundamentally different than the genetics of testosterone in a man. And so that's different scores. And muscle strength, there is a difference between men and women predictions for muscle strength too. So
Yeah. Do you know the name Keith Barr?
yeah,
So I was recently listening to some of his work, and he talks about testosterone versus estrogen levels and the effects on some tendons
yeah,
and connective tissues.
yeah.
But and you're saying you're saying that you say there's no difference in what you guys have found in the 500,000. Um,
Oh, no, 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 no. To be clear, there's no difference in the risk for these injuries between men and women. Uh, just the way the algorithm was generated, we take out differences, sex differences. So it's
oh, okay.
equally true for men and women. Uh,
Oh, okay.
that doesn't mean there isn't a difference. It just means that we specifically designed the analysis not to allow, not to have differences. These were done because they separated the men and the women into two piles and they solved it differently. And for testosterone, it makes total sense because, the genetics of testosterone in women is way different than testosterone in men.
Okay, I see. Yeah, this is, and I know you guys are working with some different organizations.
Partners here. Yeah, so here are some of our partners. This is a professional bicycle racing team in San Francisco. This is I don't know, I think it's Premier League. They might have got relegated. Um, this is a pretty fancy schmancy sports medicine clinic in Vail.
Yeah.
This is in your neck of the woods. One of our favorite clients is Dan Messina, who is a bicycle racer. Uh,
Okay.
he is
Yeah.
not a professional. So by day, he has a day job, which is like, just a regular day job. But what he really lives for is the Masters bicycle race each year, because he can win that. And so uh, staying, he really figured out, our mojo, and he's using it to compete better. Um, some of these are like sports medicine clinics. There's professional triathletes. This is a professional running team in Colorado. We have a lot of triathlon teams. So that's I haven't updated this. We're doing major league players now. So, um, one of our trainers trains major league baseball players. So,
Very good. What, and I think, you talk about trying to find these X-Men mutants and everything like that. And I like the ability, those movies are fun. The abilities they have, whether it's telekinesis or super strength or whatever. It's cliche, but in something I heard somewhere, I don't know who to credit it to, but the ability that we talk about, or that I talk about in my weight room, like every time I have an athlete come by for a recruiting trip, my little spiel, I say the greatest ability you can have is not speed or power or strength; it's availability. And
uh-huh.
I, and and I love that you guys are tying into creating that availability. I've had too many good athletes be on the
Yeah,
sideline, for
it
no good
total
reason.
sense to me. I mean, it's just so logical, and yeah, it totally works. Uh, you know, there are lots of athletes that don't realize that, their health and their availability isn't to be taken for granted, and you just have to convince them that it's as important as strength training. Because it doesn't matter how strong you are if you're not on the field.
Yeah, can't win from the sideline.
Exactly. And you do know how strong you are. You do know, your passer rating, but you can't know if you're going to get concussed or hurt a knee.
And then how about um, how about some of the medical, the more of the medical non-athlete side? And I would argue, you said you're not an athlete earlier. I would argue with that and quote Bill Bowerman and say that if you have a body, you are an athlete. And so, but what about AxGen? What if I just want to know how long I'm going to live? Are we is Are we predicting? Are we calling the shot on how we're gonna exit and how long we've got or anything like that yet?
We do. That's for this stuff called health. And the whole point with health is that, that's really serious stuff like heart disease, Alzheimer's disease. And a physician has to be in the loop before we'll do this for you. So I don't want to tell you about Alzheimer's disease or heart. I'm at high risk for heart disease and arthritis. So I should pay attention to this. But I need a physician to work with me about something sensitive to do. I know from experience that, every time I see a red card for myself, I self-diagnose with that, whether or not I have it. And so it's driving me nuts. Now I'm going off into like neurodevelopmental things. And every time I read up on something, I think I have it. So I think I've got autism and ADHD and all these schizophrenia. So all these sorts of things, I'm sure I have it. And so it's not good to send this stuff out without a physician.
You want a some wisdom to go with it.
Exactly. So I'm very careful about that. This is for the healthcare clinics where there's a sports medicine physician. And we have a number of those, but so for longevity, these things, a lot of these things can kill you, like stroke and heart disease. That thing affects your longevity just because if you die or die. The thing about this rate of aging, I used to study aging, and it's much more complicated. And there is no good genetics for whether you're going to live long or not. Not good enough that you should pay attention to it. And it's much more, how much you weigh or whether you smoke or eat red meat, having much bigger effect than the genetics.
How about that cross country team or those distance runners where 40% of the athletes are getting stress fractures? At what point do we start running into some new problems where maybe the coaches are only recruiting athletes because of their genetic profile?
Yeah, that's a good question. It could happen. There are probably, so let's look at stress fracture. So let's imagine you're a cross-country coach and you're trying to select a team and you have like 100 people apply for 15 scholarships, right? And there's there are all these things, and then you have out here is that real risk for stress fracture. So you got a high school student that looks really fast, but they're scoring out here. You have 5 high school students, and you get to pick and choose which of them, and one of them is way out here. Maybe put that into the equation. And the ethics of that is unclear to me, because you want the team to win. The kid can keep on competing. It's just that, do you actually give a scholarship to somebody that's at higher risk? So whether this is used to segregate people, I think right now it's not that strong. I mean, a kid that can run really fast versus a kid that doesn't run really fast, you would take the one that runs really fast every time. You would take the best football player. I think you would always take just the best athlete and then train them so that they didn't get hurt. I don't think you would take athletes and try to find ones that were less likely to get hurt, because in sports, I mean, the nurture part of sports, did you hit a linebacker? Did you run 120 miles? Those are much bigger effects than the genetics. So I don't think it makes too much sense yet to use genetics to create your team. I just think it makes a lot of sense to use genetics, how to train your team to reduce injuries so that they stay on the field. And so everybody wins.
Yeah, I'll often describe like my programming philosophy kind of like a Venn diagram run wild is how many little bubbles do I want to tack in
Yeah.
and disperse their time and energy. But if
Yeah.
if I had an athlete who had a profile based on what you guys are doing, that would be that could make a nice bubble on their Venn diagram. Is um, let's elevate. Okay, we're already doing some shoulder care and some ankle stability. Let's elevate those motions and do them as a priority.
Well, you know what? With our other clients, you send me your clients, we analyze them, and then I work with you to tell you what the results are. So you'll have let me show you this. You will have a team page. So hypothetically, let's say so we'd have athlete 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you would have their results for all of the tests. And so as a coach, you could see your whole team, and then you can sort them. You can sort them not for cancer, but you can sort them for ankle injury. And you can figure out everybody that's at risk for ankle injury. You can say, those guys get this exercise in the preseason.
Yeah, that aligns exactly how we apply some other. We'll bucket them into different needs, and they'll start. If you're in this bucket, you guys go over there and do this, and they'll warm up today. And you're in that other bucket for this other, whether it's their maybe like a force plate jump profile, like how they jump and how they move at high speeds, or hey, you're on the track team. The coach says that your drive during your acceleration is just fine, but your maintenance of speed at high speeds is kind of lacking. So we're going to pick these different exercises for you. And so we would I could see very easily how you would take these new risk factors and apply it to training.
Great.
Good. Got me wheels turning. This would be awesome. How about with that coaching, you know, quandary, I guess you'd call it, where you say, well, you'd probably still just pick the best athletes.
Yeah.
Are you seeing any other maybe like ethical or new issues that come up with this branch of intervention?
Yeah, I tell you the ethical one I can't figure out. At the pro level, the owners and the players hate each other. And what would work is, when you're the team owner, you have all of your players go through a medical. And so, their x-rays, their MRIs, their past injuries, and you're allowed to use your team doctors to poke and prod the athletes just to figure out what you're buying. So what would work is to include this in the medical. So this is as interesting, it's probably more informative than the MRIs and the x-rays they're giving their athletes. Who was the guy, the pass rusher from the Vegas Raiders, Max Crosby, right? He got traded to Baltimore until the Baltimore physicians looked at him and said, that knee isn't up to snuff or something like that. This could be like that. You could, Max Crosby, and the reason why this is more informative is that I know that Max Crosby had a knee injury, and it's on all the news. And so, the team physicians at Baltimore, they could tell you a little bit about how that injury is resolving and whether it's going to, but you already know he had a knee injury. What you don't know is he at risk for concussion, or is he at risk for Achilles tendon? I mean, if he tears his tendon, what is that, a year or something like that to come back?
Yeah.
And so to me, that's as informative as the knee MRIs that they gave him, and way cheaper. because, this stuff is pennies on the dollar compared to MRIs and CT scans. So I think that's I mean, the players aren't going to like that. The owners, once they figure it out, are definitely going to jump onto that. And so, that's something that's coming down the road that's unresolved.
I don't think those younger guys ever want to hear that they're anything but invincible,
Yeah.
or denial. Denial is a very powerful tool when used appropriately.
Yeah. So most of the times we're not selling direct to athletes. It's rare for like a 20-year-old guy or girl to say, I'm worried about my health. Maybe the women are a little bit better on that. When I was 20, I was invincible. I just show me a wall, I'm going to try to run through it. And,
Yeah.
I thought we could do it. And so they're not the ones that are going to figure this out. It's going to be the people that take care of them. They're team physicians and the trainers, the strength coaches. This is where our sweet spot is. Because you can think for your athletes. The athletes don't have to think about what's happening to them. They just have to get trained.
Yeah. Yeah. If they wanted to be strength coaches and trainers, they'd go to school for it and they do all that. So
Yeah.
Their job is to be the athlete. Yeah.
Yeah.
How about, you're just talking about age there. And actually that was one of the questions I had is what's the youngest that you're testing versus the oldest that you're testing, and any feedback on maybe how that's impacted anyone?
There's no upper limit on how old it is. Well, the way it works is the younger you are, the more you have to protect. 13-year-old Tom Brady has a lot to protect. 42-year-old Tom Brady or LeBron, it doesn't matter. It's not much is going to change if he were to do this because he's already had a career. So there's that.
Yeah.
Legally, 13 is the youngest we will test. 13 to
Okay.
18, I think you need parental permission. And then over 18, you're adult, you just get tested.
And how about with epigenetics? Is a 13-year-old, are they able to do things, whether they're good or bad things, to change what they look like maybe at 30? At what do you guys ever see any kind of interventions that are actually changing your test results?
Okay. Epigenetics, and there's all sorts of other things like there's all sorts of blood biomarkers. You send a tube of blood to basically to Quest Diagnostics in San Diego, and they look at the results and they give you back all of these blood biomarkers, and a lot of them. So that's really informative. This like cortisol is really informative about whether you're under stress. If you have sky high levels of cortisol, you probably overtrain. You probably back down a bit. Epigenetics is really how chromatin is affecting your DNA. That's more complicated to do. It's pretty informative. It's just that it's like all of these things will change with time. So epigenetics, blood biomarkers, everything will change. And so like your height and weight can, not your height, but your weight can change. And so these DNA things never change. And so it's the same when you're a baby, it's the same when you're 80 years old. So that's one of the beauties of genetic testing. We don't do epigenetics just because you'd have to redo the test every time you wanted to know. And some of these things, it's not clear how long the results last.
How about any kind of gene editing? What's going on with that in the U.S. borders right now? Can I come into you? Can you guys take that can you get rid of that inhibitor gene for me so I can grow muscles like that kid in Germany?
Okay. I mean, the most simple answer is no. Um, Under the comic book mode, under the idea that, you are an evil billionaire and I have no ethics. You have $1 billion. It's scientifically plausible for me to edit your genome and give you some superpower.
So you're telling me there's a chance?
You could give, some of that wouldn't be that trivial. Like this muscle gene, you have to do it in pretty much every muscle cell in your body. So that'd be one complicated. What's the other one? There's a about EPO and how Tour de France racers are using EPO to win. It's one of the most commonly abused and tested for drugs at high levels. It's clearly a performance enhancing drug. So there was this Finnish cross country runners way long ago, like 30 years ago, maybe 40 years ago. He was winning world championships, national championships, Olympic medals, and you look at the guy, and he looks kind of strange because his veins are popping out. I mean, he just had red veins all over the place. So FIDA, is that the doping, FIDA? Is that the thing that tests for doping?
On over here, USADA, but I'm not sure.
Okay. Well, the doping testing guys, they said, you must be doping with EPO. And they tested him and they measured his EPO levels. No, they measured his red blood cell counts, and it was sky high. And they said, there's no way you can get levels of red blood cells that high without injecting EPO. So they took away all his medals. He protested vehemently, and he said, I didn't use EPO. This is just my normal state. And he got a famous geneticist in England to sequence his DNA. And that geneticist found out that he had a mutation in the EPO receptor. So normal people, you need EPO. It binds to the EPO receptor. EPO receptor tells your stem cells make more red blood cells. This guy had a receptor that was always activated in his blood stem cells. So to him, his blood stem cells said, I'm making red blood cells all the time. And that's why, and it's just like having EPO injected, but he was born that way. And he argued successfully that because he was born with this mutation that gave him the superpower, he gets to keep all his medals. So we could do, that would be easier to do for you if you wanted to win a gold medal in endurance sport. Because there you just get your stem cells, do the same mutation in your stem cells. You're going to have stem cells that crank out. And if you just, have some of your stem cells transform this way, you're going to make more red blood cells and get the benefit. Yeah, so some of these things you could do genetic changing. Yeah.
I saw a advertisement, and I guess it's real. It's a supplement for parents to feed their kids called Tallitude to make them taller. Have you heard about this?
Do you know what is it growth hormone? Is it human growth hormone?
I think it's a proprietary blend of minerals and vitamins and
yeah, so all of this thing, one of the things that's really hard is the amount of snake oil that's out there. Because there's Tallitude. If you don't know much, you'd rather take Tallitude than do this thing, because none of these things are going to make your kid taller. So if you want to make your kid taller or give them this EPO super mutation, no, that's a different thing. But yeah, there's all sorts of promises, and there are genetic testing companies that promise they'll tell you if you're going to be an endurance or a power athlete. They're going to tell you all sorts of things about VO2 max. It's not really rigorous.
See, do you have any resources that you think if anybody's listened to us today and they're interested in this? So I think I like the book The Sports Gene.
Yeah,
by
great book.
David. Do you have any other resources, whether they are you're involved with them or just others that you think people might kind of get a kick out of, or that they could
I'm
grow?
back on
grow
the
their-
AxGen.us. If you Google that,
yeah.
you go to sports, you go to blogs. We have different blogs, so about what some of these things are. I think that would be a resource. And we also have, yeah, and I think the blogs are better. We also have a page that lists all the publications, so that if you wanted to read the primary source for the publications. But these things are written for high-end lay people. We don't need a PhD in genetics to figure out.
I hopped on the website and went through several of them. They are digestible. You can get through them and learn a little bit. Yeah, they're good.
If you're talking about lecture materials because you want to give a lecture or something like that, I've got PowerPoint presentations for AxGen, and I can send you appropriate material.
Okay. Yes, if you've got a resource, I'll take it. Yeah.
All righty, I'll send you a presentation.
And then, if you don't mind, how about, I think you're already kind of operating in the future compared to what the rest of us kind of understand, but what do you predict is going to happen in the future, both for the field of sports genetics and then just for yourself as well?
For myself, my primary goal is just to move academic science into useful science, academic genetics into used genetics. And so my medical doctor doesn't use genetics at all. I mean, you're probably not genetically tested by your doctor either, right? Yeah, as a geneticist, I know there's tons of information that would be useful for me. I just looked up and told my doctor about drugs that don't work for me. And so we're altering my prescription. And, some of the things that, like I'm a type 2 diabetic, and I'm really, really at risk for diabetes. And so if I had known that, I would have paid attention to my diet way early, and I didn't pay any attention. I just like to eat the unhealthy stuff. So I love junk food, but if I had known that and I known my risk for type 2, at least I would have tested myself for diabetes and gotten on top of it way before I did. That's me. And then, like the future of this, I think it really looks bright. I mean, we're able to take athletes and give them longer, healthier careers, and longer, healthier means more accomplishments, which is, how athlete rates their rate. How many medals did you win? So that's what we want to do. The research is going on as we speak. So I'm working on 3 new papers with a sports medicine physician in Arizona. So it's always continuing. And what's what we know today is just going to be, we're going to know more tomorrow than what we know today.
Very good. Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thanks for setting this up. Hope we can work together.
Yes, sir. We will. We'll make it happen. Thank you for listening to the Winning Wellness Podcast. Please keep in mind that all views expressed within the show are not a reflection of any universities or organizations that I may be affiliated with. If you have any questions or suggestions for future shows, please reach out through Instagram, where I can be found with the title name of Mitch Schwartzman.